Nusrat.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you? You're looking
Good.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Either you. I was going to say I love that pink on you. It looks really nice.
Thank you. Just let's wait for like some time. We are like on time.
Okay.
We're gonna wait for like another 1 minute, then we can start. Okay, so let's start the webinar. We have two attendees at this point of time, and I believe that moving on, there will be more attendees. But let's start. So, good afternoon and good morning to everyone, and a very warm welcome for today's webinar. I'm Svetlina, and I will be your host for the next hour or so as we explore one of the most pressing topics of international professionals working or hoping to work in the United States, that is H1B alternatives. So I believe that both of you might already aware about the alternatives, but I'm very excited to introduce Nusrat. And she's our senior immigration attorney with years of hands-on experience guiding individuals and companies through the complexities of US immigration law. So, Nusrat, all yours.
Thank you so much, Swat. Nice to meet you all, and I'm glad to be here. So, H1B has been a hot topic for a while, understandably so. This administration has really put a target on H1B for some time, unfortunately. And it's led to some anxiety naturally, which is completely understandable. It looks like the market has responded to these, attacks on H1B or the anxiety relating to H1B. And there seem to be fewer H1B sponsorship opportunities out there. So, great time to understand what other options may exist, whether someone has been laid off from an H1B position, or if someone is approaching graduation and they're looking for the next thing to do to be able to stay in the United States and work. So thankfully, there are a couple of options depending on a person's qualifications and background. So there are at least, let's say, 8 different options that are available as alternatives to H1B. So first and foremost, there's, if someone has OPT or CPT available to them. So just a moment. Okay. So just making sure that you all can hear me okay. The audio is good. I'm just getting notification. Okay, good.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So OPT and CPT are options. CPT is also kind of really popular with people that have already graduated with an undergraduate degree and they're in an advanced phase of their career. So maybe they're looking at a master's program and they're looking for day one CPT programs. Now, this can be a really attractive option, but you have to be careful. So day one CPT can be kind of a red flag to USCIS. It really just depends on what is always the case, which is this a credible program? Are you genuinely and sincerely attending classes, completing the program? Or is this program that this school has, put together, is it really just a workaround to give people work authorization rather than it being a genuine educational academic program? So the kinds of things to look out for is definitely look for a school with a good reputation. You have to be genuinely involved in completing the program. If there are in-person classes, great. It's not absolutely necessary. It can be virtual, but the better the reputation of the school, the better the chances that this is not going to be flagged by USCIS as problematic. Because the dangerous things with Day 1C is that you enroll in a program in good faith, you think it's a real program, you see this great benefit. Naturally, you're attracted to day one CPT because it is attractive. It means you can start working as soon as you start attending school. You don't have to wait to finish a program to get your work authorization. You can start working right away. And it's, you're in an advanced phase, so it's for a master's program perhaps. But yeah, you want to make sure that it's a good school. The danger is you enroll in something in good faith, you think it's a real program, and it turns out that, it's not a legitimate program. It's intended just to give people access to work authorization rather than be a genuine academic program. And USCIS is investigating the school, and ICE is investigating the school. And these investigations can last a long time, and they can be happening in the background while the school carries on with its activities. And then one day there's, a site visit or a raid even, or suddenly people are indicted. So, people that are administrators in the school. So I've seen this happen over the years. people that have good intentions, they sign up for these programs, they give them money, and unfortunately, sometimes people are taken advantage of, or sometimes, you let the temptation get the better of you and you enroll in something that you're not so sure is genuine, and then it turns out not to be genuine. And these things can affect you today and they can affect you 10 years from now. So it's very important to be careful and mindful of, what you end up enrolling in. So that's a CPT option. There's also, other options in terms of different temporary work visas. So there's a whole variety. So obviously, H1B cap subject, that's what the normal H1Bs are for most people. There's a sub variety of an H1B one, which is specifically for Chilean and Singaporean nationals. It's a little bit of a different program, but countries with not huge populations, so we'll set that aside, but just know that it exists if you happen to have a nationality from those countries. There's also the cap-exempt H1B, which is, for academic or nonprofit institutions. So those are great because, you don't have to have ever been selected in the H1B lottery. If it's a qualifying organization, and it's not just universities and academic institutions, it's also qualifying nonprofits or organizations that partner with these academic institutions. So great option if you are in that kind of path, you have an academic background or some kind of, nonprofit oriented, social service oriented kind of background. Those can be an option for you as well. And then other temporary non-immigrant work visas are T. Again, that's nationality specific. So for Canadians and Mexican nationals, that's a great option. Very straightforward. You just have to be on a list of occupations. Obviously not open to everyone, open to people from Canada and Mexico. And then there are E3 visas. Those are for Australians. So if you happen to have Australian nationality, great option. Very, very straightforward. And then beyond that, we have E1 and E2 visas. So those are people at perhaps a more advanced level, unless, you have to be from a country with the correct nationality that is part of these treaties with the United States that allows for this kind of program to be taken advantage of. And you can be an employee with the same nationality as the ownership of the company that qualifies. So a bigger company can do it, or you can do it as an individual, depending on what you have to invest and if you're starting a business. One point I want to go back to with the H1B alternative is that there is also an entrepreneur H1B, which is somewhat newer. You are still subject to having been selected in the cap, but if you have the possibility of starting your own business, and you can demonstrate that it's, you'll be engaging in the specialty occupation, and you can demonstrate that you have the funds to pay yourself the prevailing wage, then you can do an entrepreneur H1B. It's a really interesting option. It's brand new, so there's a lot we're learning about it as we're going through. But you can have even 100% ownership of a company and essentially self-sponsor. The difference is the first and second H1B approvals you get will be good for 18 months. And then after that, you can get 3-year extensions. Perm would not be available through this kind of self-sponsorship because you can't self-sponsor through perm, but you could do other things like pursue the green card, like with an EB2NA or EB1A if you qualify. So this is a potential option for people if you have the means and, if you have the business to support this kind of a petition. It's essentially a self-sponsorship through H1B, assuming you have previously been selected for the cap and you are not subject to that, 7-year limit, or you have a means of extending, your H1B status. And then, of course, there's an L1. The L1 visa is for people who are either executives or managers. That's L1A. And then there's an L1B for people with specialized knowledge. And these are great visas that have a very clear path to a green card, depending on your background. But you have to have qualifying experience abroad. It has to be at least 1 year of experience abroad with a company that has the right kind of relationship with a US company. So for, at least 1 year in the last 3 years, you have to have been in either a executive, managerial, or specialty occupation, or excuse me, specialized knowledge position abroad for a company that is related to a company in the US. And the relation can be an affiliate, a subsidiary. There has to be some ownership and control. So there can be somewhat different relationships as well, or different structures of the relationship between the companies. But there has to be basically a foreign entity related to a US entity, and you have to have at least a year of experience with a foreign entity and then be transferred into the US. And you get a 3-year visa essentially and permission to work for that company. And then you can eventually qualify for the EB1C category, which is a great green card category because you get that EB1 priority date. And you have to essentially demonstrate that you had the qualifying experience abroad for at least a year and that you have a job offer in the United States. So the difference is it's not self-sponsored, but it's a great pathway to a green card directly from non-immigrant to immigrant. L1 visa also has great, work authorization for a spouse. It's essentially incidental to the status. So if you're married, your spouse gets work authorization. Your children are free to attend school or work, children under 21. So not everyone qualifies, but it's definitely worth exploring if you work for a company that has a foreign entity. And you should also consider, if a person has been laid off and your company has an option of you returning to your home country and perhaps continuing work in this specialized capacity, then you can consider putting that 1 year of work in and then coming back on this different type of visa. It does have a limitation on how many renewals you can get. You get 6 years. So a lot of times people will switch between H1B or L1 if they've been selected for the lottery or try for the lottery. But the idea is eventually you want to apply for that green card anyway, because there will be a limitation. So that leads to the next option, which is an O1. One of the great things about an O1 is that there are no limitations on how many times you can renew. You can renew forever. So the O1 visa does require you to qualify, though. You have to have a special kind of status in your profession in order to get the O1 visa. So it's similar to EB1A. It's like a mini EB1 where you have to demonstrate that you meet certain criteria. You have to demonstrate that you have extraordinary ability. You're special somehow. You have the documentation to prove it. And then there is an element where you can't technically self-sponsor for an O1, but there are two ways to do it. So you can either have a company petition for you for the O1, and then you work for them. They apply for it. You get the O1 for 3 years at a time. You can renew indefinitely. They sign off on everything. They're responsible for you the same way they're responsible for an H1B. Or you can do a petition through an agent. So this is a little bit more complex, but essentially it allows you to work for different employers or companies in somewhat of a contract capacity. So when you submit your petition, you need someone that's US based to sign off on your petition and submit it for you. So the idea of the agent comes around where this agent acts as your agent for at least for purposes of the O1 petition. Beyond that, they can do whatever you want them to do. They can be a tax professional, so they can help you with your taxes relating to your work. They can be someone that helps you with negotiating contracts with, companies or consulting kind of stints. Think of it similar to how an actor works with an agent. The agent helps them to find opportunities and they can help them negotiate contracts and deals. And that's kind of where this idea of the agent comes from, but it's applicable to a wide variety of professions. You don't have to be just an actor, an artist, or a musician to work with an agent for the O1. You do have to show that you have at least 3 years of work lined up, and then you do have to meet all the criteria, of course. So it can be in a field like science, it can be in the arts, it can be in education, it can be in business, it can be in athletics. And the standard varies a little bit depending on what your background is, like arts, motion picture, television is a little bit different than, business or science. So that is definitely something that you can work with, like building a profile, making sure you're seeking out the right kinds of opportunities to show how good you are in your field, and you're, building up that resume and the documentation needed to get an approval for the O1. Other options for, an alternative to the H1B also include essentially the employment-based green cards or the family-based green cards. And of course, both of those options require, for the most part, an employer to sponsor you. except for EB1A and EB2NA. So the EB1 category and the EW allow you to self-sponsor. You can still work with a sponsor. They can also sponsor you for those, but you can self-sponsor as well, which is a great benefit, of course. So it gives you ultimate freedom and flexibility. You have a green card that is completely untethered to any employer, and you can work for whomever you like. Now, because it's such a great benefit, it means it requires a lot for you to qualify. You have to be the cream of the crop, show that you're really good. So you should be at the top percentage of your field. It doesn't have to be the top 1%. It can be maybe the top 15% or so. So the way you demonstrate it for EB1 is by meeting the criteria and showing overall that you're at the very top of your field. For EB2NIW, it's somewhat related, but the mechanism for deciding how good you are is different. The legal framework is that you have to have a proposed endeavor, something you want to do in the United States, some goal you want to accomplish. The goal has to be nationally important, have substantial merit. Very amorphous definition, but essentially you should be able to demonstrate that it's going to benefit the United States, like the whole United States or even a region that therefore affects the whole United States. So you can show that through economic benefits, more job opportunities for US workers, having some kind of social good, advancing pure science that is also recognized. Artistic and creative endeavors can also fall into proposed endeavor. So that's one half of it. The other half of it is showing that you're well positioned to advance that endeavor. So to show that you're well positioned, of course, you have to have the right education, the right experience, and the right accomplishments. And this is where it kind of starts to look a little bit like EA, but it is different. You don't have the criteria. You want to show that, your experience, your very specific experience makes you the best person to accomplish that goal that you said you wanted to accomplish. And of course, you have to have an advanced degree or the equivalent, essentially. The alternative is you can show exceptional ability. It's not extraordinary, but exceptional. It's a little bit lower of a standard. But most attorneys will not go for the exceptional ability way of qualifying because it's just challenging. It's better to, and most people have this anyway, either an advanced degree or you have a bachelor's plus 5 years of progressive experience. So that's EB2 and IW. Now so that kind of wraps up all the options, both non-immigrant and immigrant, more or less. Of course, you can always, if someone's been laid off, they can switch back to F1, they can switch to B1, B2 to get themselves more time. These are kind of short-term stopgap measures to try to give yourself time to either wrap up your affairs and leave or to find what you're going to do next and find some other status. Okay, so Swati, I guess we can move on to the questions at this point.
Yes, it was like very very insightful because I never like heard about everything like this. I mean, it was like very short, sweet, and understandable. Like everybody could have
Oh,
understand very
good.
nicely, I believe. So,
Thank you so much.
anybody has any questions for this, you can guys unmute yourself, ask, or drop into the chat box.
Yeah, I see Hari has asked some questions. What are the options available for those outside the US with or without a job offer? So basically, everything I said now is also an option. So O1, definitely an option. Obviously, if you were from the right country, have the right nationality, all the other, country-specific options, any of these are available. So the difference is if you're outside the US, you have to go to the consulate to get an interview and get the visa issued to you. And we know that unfortunately the consulates are just having a lot of trouble these days. They're really behind. Appointments are hard to get. O1s should be a little bit easier than H1Bs to get appointments, but it is definitely tough. Okay, so your specific situation, you've completed your PhD in accounting. Congratulations, MSU. I'm from Michigan as well. Working as assistant professor, Frankfurt School of Finance Management, Germany. Okay, considering applying to the US universities fall 2026. Start date is likely to be August 2027. So in order to answer those questions, so I can't give you legal advice, but I will give you general information. So if you're outside the US and you're applying for these programs, you will not have work authorization unless you have a green card. That's the only way. So you don't have to be in the US to apply for a green card either. And this is a little known fact that you can definitely apply for a green card from outside the US. So you could pursue EB-2 and you could pursue EB-1, especially if you're a PhD and you're already working in the academic realm, you may very well qualify. So definitely have your profile reviewed and see if you would qualify for one of those green card categories. Otherwise, generally, yes, you would need work authorization. If you happen to get an O1 and it's within your field and you're working in your field, then it's questionable whether how you would answer that. I mean, you could ostensibly answer that no, you don't need work authorization. The thing with an O1 is that, when you submit your application for the O1, you're supposed to say what you're going to do for the next 3 years. You have an itinerary, you say where you'll be, but it's forward looking. So it's understood that these things can change and, it's okay for it to change up to a point. If it changes drastically from what you said you were going to do, then you have to submit an amendment to your original O1 petition and notify USCIS, hey, I said I was going to do these things, but now I'm doing XYZ. And it's a very fine line, and it's kind of a, thing of art to determine how big a change is big enough to require an amendment. But generally speaking, if it's within the same field, you're doing the same type of work for a similar type of organization or company or individual, then you don't have to submit an amendment. It has to be a material change, what they call. So that's something you would talk with an attorney about if the situation came up. But you could apply for an O1, and if you qualify, you have work authorization to work within your field of extraordinary ability, and you can take on additional assignments in that work. And you could explain that to, whomever you're applying to work with. They would have to understand that your work would be restricted to that specialty that you said you had. Okay, if someone had an H1B for 3 years, moved out of the US and now receives a job offer, can they use the remaining period of H1B or would they need a new H1B? Does this also attract the $100,000 fee? That's a very good question. So generally speaking, if you've been outside the US for less than a year, you can reuse your old cap selection. But this is something that an attorney would have to evaluate your time periods of work and how long you've been outside the US. But it is possible to use that old cap selection and then just continue working. You can also choose to enter the lottery again. Well, the employer can choose to enter you in the lottery again. But if that happens, that would most likely be subject to $100,000 fee. But if you've already been selected, it's a little bit of a gray area that you should discuss with an attorney.
But if you have been outside the US for more than a year, would you still be able to use that the H1B recapture thing? So if you have been outside the US for 4 years, does this, or 5 years?
Yeah, I would say it's unlikely. It's not like black and white, but it's unlikely that you would be able to reuse the old H1B. I mean, it's because there isn't a clear law on it. It's how you interpret the law. So you could certainly try, but getting the employer to be willing to try for you to use that old cap selection will be a challenge. But yeah, if you'd like to schedule a follow-up consultation, I'd be happy to discuss your specific situation.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
I don't think we have any other questions, so we can wind up the session. Thank you everybody for joining in, and thank you so much for explaining us the alternatives of H1B, which is very important to look on these days. And the session was insightful, and I hope everybody understand it very well about each visa categories and how it works. Okay, so we'll see again in next 2 weeks. Take care.
Thank you. I just had a quick question for no. So how can I sign up for a one-on-one session if there is any link that I can use or?
Sure, yeah. So Swati, do you want to coordinate that or let's see.
Yeah.
I think yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, or you can just email me and I'm gonna help you out with the link session and everything.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I will email you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thanks, Swati. Bye-bye.
Thank you.